Welcome, everyone. I'm Paul Holthus, the founding CEO and president of the World Ocean Council. The World Ocean Council is the global blue economy business and investment organization. We are here participating with a panel focused on the oceans and ocean business and the role of ocean business and industry in climate and climate change. The name of this session is On the Horizon, Business-Led Ocean Solutions to Climate Change. And this is part of the International Chamber of Commerce series on Make Climate Action Everyone's Business here at COP26 in Glasgow. We have a panel of ocean-related business and investment and innovation leaders that are participating in the activities and efforts and membership of the World Ocean Council. And I will go ahead and introduce them as they provide some introductory comments. And first we have Piotr Konopka, who is with DP World, and I'll pass the mic over to Piotr to kick off this discussion.
Great, thank you very much, Paul, and a very warm welcome. Good evening from Dubai. So maybe just to introduce DP World very, very quickly, we are a global data-driven end-to-end smart trade enabler. We're present on literally every continent. We have over 100 locations across ports and terminals, logistics, economic zones, and shipping assets. And we also have a fairly ambitious decarbonization agenda, which is to reach net zero carbon by 2050 or sooner. We may be looking to accelerate that actually as a result of what we've learned at COP26 and then through the latest climate change reports by IPCC. So before I move on to talk about the adaptation, I wanted to briefly touch on the mitigation of climate change and our activities. So our decarbonization strategy sits on 5 pillars. The first one is around equipment electrification. And the second one is renewable electricity supply. Of course, the more you electrify, the more renewable electricity you need in order to decarbonize. We're also looking at process efficiency and digitization, where we see a lot of opportunities to decarbonize in the short term. The fourth pillar is low carbon fuel supply. And again, there are a variety of solutions all the way from short-term use of biodiesel and biofuels, and longer term, we're looking at solutions such as hydrogen and all the derivatives to power our equipment and our ships. And then the last element is more on the environmental side, which is carbon compensation. And what we mean by carbon compensation is not really necessarily purchasing credits off the market, but we are looking at nature-based solutions, for example, mangrove, seagrasses, forests with appropriate carbon accreditation. Talking about climate change mitigation, I think this is, adaptation following the mitigation. I think this is a very interesting topic. And, you know, this conversation would feel is only just emerging. And I spoke about this in the International Maritime Hub at COP26, which was an absolutely great debate. So what we do around this at DP World, as I said, it's fairly early days. We've only started, you know, assessing and looking across our global assets in terms of what the risks are. And there are really 3 elements that we are mainly interested in, and we're surveying across the different terminals, which is rising sea levels, of course. The second one is increased adverse weather events. As we know, one of the biggest risks of climate change is that these 1,000 years tsunamis, hurricanes, storms, are likely to be happening once every 100 years, once every 10 years. So assets need to be ready for that. And then the third element is rising temperatures. So looking at how our rising temperature is going to first of all affect our assets, but even more importantly, our workforce. Looking at the length of shifts, the rest areas for the workforce, operating the air conditioning. So these are the things that we're looking at when it comes to adaptation. And to wrap up before the discussion, to share some kind of key learnings so far from that exercise, is that we feel like the assets generally in developed countries are fairly well prepared, both from the asset side and also from monitoring and forecasting, and all the local agencies do a fairly good job in terms of at least letting the terminals know when such things may happen. But we found that in more in the developing countries there is a big gap. So something that we're certainly looking for is analytics around climate change. What sort of rising sea levels you would expect in specific geolocations? What adverse weather effects will happen in 50 and 100 years from now? And interestingly, one of the motivators for this whole study were actually external factors, and it was a number of financing institutions. That of course don't want to end up with a stranded assets. So these sort of assessments are increasingly asked for and required in the market. We believe there is a lot of capacity building in this area required, both for our internal stakeholders as well as external stakeholders, to educate people around the risks of climate change. In the short term, we think there is a lot of opportunity in simply operational excellence, the way that the operations are run. For example, how tall, how high do you stack your containers in the port, and what's your methodology for lashing, right? And there's of course many more which I'm happy to discuss. And the way forward on this is that we are currently setting up an internal cross-departmental working group, because the interesting thing about this is that it really touches everything from health safety through engineering, insurance, risk, finance. It's such an interdisciplinary issue. So in that working group, it's again early days. The activities that we want to run are, for example, war rooms, where we would sit with everyone, throw out a scenario saying, a storm of magnitude X hits our port, here is the damage, what happens? And we're looking forward to hearing from all the departments. So I think there is a lot of interesting output still to come from that work. I think that's all. Very much looking forward to the discussion on this.
Great, thanks very much, Peter. I think that really highlights the scope of change and the uncertainty and the need, as you say, to really work across all aspects of a company to try and understand and address this uncertainty. I think that's really valuable. I think was to hear about how you're doing that operationally within the company. I think there's going to be a lot more of this sort of scenario planning, and that larger companies could certainly help lead the way in terms of developing best practices that then others could learn from and adopt. And that it is touching upon so many sectors in so many different ways, and so the core infrastructure such as ports has really got a critical role to play for a lot of different industries. Amongst those industries will be the development of offshore renewables, which is one of the several important areas that Simply Blue is leading on. And so we have Christoph Harwood from Simply Blue to pick up on that, the renewables and the other areas in which Simply Blue is working. So Christoph.
Great, thanks, Paul. So yeah, hello everybody, my name is Christoph Harwood from Simply Blue Group. I'm Director of Strategy and Policy for the group, and also look after the aquaculture and the long-term strategy for the business. Simply Blue, we take the view that we need to work with the oceans to address climate change, to address the increasing population's demand for food and biodiversity loss. I mean, some people are working with the rainforests, some people work with the farmers, some people work with cities. We work with the oceans. And we work with the oceans as a project developer. Project development means that our key role is to make things happen, but we don't make technology. We don't have all the money. We have to bring together all the different parties, whether it is the technology providers, the finance providers, the regulators, the politicians, the operators, to bring a project up and running. And our main focus at the moment is in renewable energy from the sea. But we're also working in a couple of other areas which I can cover. So we are working with floating wind as the biggest new coming market, we think, for the world. Clearly, the offshore wind market has taken off, especially in the UK and Europe, and we are developing floating wind projects here in where I am in Scotland, in the United Kingdom, projects in the United Kingdom, in Scotland, down in South Wales, across in Ireland, where the company is based and was set up in 2011, and also in the United States. We work with large partners. We're working in the UK, United States, with Total Energies. We're working with Shell as joint venture partner in Ireland. And our job really is to get the projects to a stage at which they feel comfortable and excited about joining us as partners in joint ventures. But it's not just about floating wind. The oceans can produce energy in other ways. So we're looking at wave energy. We think wave energy is going to be an important energy in the future. It is still very early days now. And a lot of people have been burnt in the past, and we've been burnt a bit in the past with wave energy. But we see a role for it creating power from the oceans. One of the interesting things about wave energy, it can produce power when the wind might not be blowing, and therefore that helps with energy systems. However, as well as energy, we think the oceans will help feed us. We believe in sustainable aquaculture. We are developing salmon farms here in Scotland, but there are low impact salmon farms that will capture the waste and keep out the sea lice. And that addresses a lot of the local environmental concerns that people have about salmon farming. It is done in a joint venture again. Again, we're not operators, we're not farmers, but we work, and we're working here in Scotland with a company called Trimara Services, an experienced salmon farming business, and with a backing from Golden Acres Food. So those are things which are happening. There are projects underway, there are projects in development. But we're also looking about where else the oceans might play their role. And we're interested in the role that seaweed might play. Seaweed is one of those parts of the natural world that we think can do a lot more. It is clearly an important food source out in Southeast Asia. And here in Western Europe, we're not great at eating it, but we think more and more people will see its benefits. We also think it will be good feedstock into other areas. You see some seaweed helping reduce methane emissions from cows, called Asparagopsis. You see the ability of kelp to go into food as a replacement for perhaps soya, and you see other opportunities for seaweed. It does absorb carbon, which is very interesting, and of course that is what we need to do. The oceans have absorbed 30% of the carbon, and therefore the more we can work with oceans on carbon dioxide removal, again, that will support and work alongside what the natural systems are doing in the forests and in soil and in restorative farming. So we see the oceans playing their way. But with carbon dioxide removal, we also think there's an opportunity around bringing some of the new technologies in, where you see electrical solutions coming in, whether it's electrolysis or electrodialysis. They all need power, so that fits nicely with our wind turbines or with our wave energy. Now, we're not active in those. We're currently just researching them, trying to understand the future. But if I think anybody looks at the numbers for 1.5 degrees, what we need to do on carbon, we can see that carbon dioxide removal from the atmosphere is going to be needed. And the net zero bit, the trick in net zero is actually that means people need to remove carbon, and that can be through artificial means or through nature-based solutions, and the oceans can do both those things. So yes, we're blue economy project developers. We like to make things happen with the oceans, renewables, food, and we hope one day carbon dioxide removal.
Thanks, Christoph. That's really exemplary of the complexity of the ocean business ecosystem as well as the opportunities. And certainly here at the World Ocean Council, we've been very actively pursuing the business and investment case for ocean carbon dioxide removal and blue carbon. As part of that, we've been something we've been working on for many years, and one of our longstanding member companies in that area is Ocean Nourishment, and we have the monthly roundtable on ocean carbon dioxide removal and blue carbon that Ocean Nourishment really helped kickstart with us, and so we're very happy to have Jill Storey here from the advisory board of Ocean Nourishment to pick up on the carbon dioxide removal part of the discussion. So, Jill.
Okay, well, thanks, Paul, and thanks, Christoph, as well. That was a good segue in terms of the opportunity, because we see there's oceans have got an amazing opportunity just in terms of the ability to store, the scale and the permanence, because obviously with land-based solutions, a lot of land-based solutions, by the time we get to 2050, some of the carbon will be recycled. So with Ocean Nourishment, we've been working for 10 to 15 years on macronutrient ocean sequestration. And we're looking at enhancing the biological pump and effectively looking at areas of the ocean that are deficient in certain nutrients that spark the growth of phytoplankton to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and also grow the fish stocks. So what we've been looking at this year is actually we've defined a Whale X project as part of the company, and Whale X is looking at creating a robotic whale and actually mimicking whale excretions, because whale excretions create photosynthesis and help take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And I think as a lot of people will know, there used to be 5 million whales in the oceans, and now we're down to about 1.3 million whales. So that 3.7 million whales were missing. They're missing in action. They're missing in terms of the nutrients that are helping spark the growth of phytoplankton. So it's a very interesting space. There's a lot of interest in this area, a lot of activity. But one of the issues has been is that for the last 10 to 15 years, organisations like Ocean Nourishment, and there's other solutions as well, people have been working on them, but it's actually been almost in a bit of a vacuum, because people have been doing it because they can see the benefit for the planet. But in terms of actually creating a market, there's been the supply of ideas, but until now, there hasn't been the demand. So I think what's really interesting and what's happened this year, there's been virtually a doubling in the number of organisations that have come out with their net zero commitments and countries. And we're now seeing the price of carbon grow, all of a sudden start to grow quite substantially, so that some of these solutions are starting to become economically viable. And there's also the demand is there in terms of companies now have got the net zero commitments, but they're now having to go back and work out, well, what are we actually going to do about it? How are we going to, in practice, get to net zero? And obviously some companies have been working on this for a while, and the core part of most businesses is actually to focus on decarbonising their operations, their core operations. But for a large number of companies who maybe are in capital intensive industries or are in hard to abate sectors, they're going to have to look much more broadly in terms of their supply chains and outside their supply chains and start to get involved in other areas that might be outside their comfort zones. They might have to make some bets. Some of these bets won't pay off, but actually by getting involved in some of these technologies and some of these ocean opportunities where the ability to scale and permanence, the quality of any carbon credits that are created, at the high quality credits, there's a great opportunity, and it gives, if people get involved early, it gives them the institutional knowledge, they build capacity within the organisation, and for some organisations it's going to lead to new business areas. So it's starting to get interesting, and Paul's been doing a fantastic job with the World Ocean Council in terms of trying to bring together the solutions and people who are working on the solutions, which I'll say have still got a long way to go in terms of there's a lot more research and there's a lot more testing, and we'll come on to that a bit later in the discussion. But bringing in organisations who are in the sector, who've got deep capabilities and in the sector to try and match the two to start those discussions. So I'll leave the rest for the remaining discussion, but that's sort of an introduction to the space.
Thanks very much, Jill. And there is so much movement in this space now, and certainly this week and last week at the COP, but there's been an incredible amount of discussion about carbon markets and offsets and the different pathways to achieving that, and I think the pioneers like Ocean Nourishment and the others that are involved in the WC Ocean Carbon Sequestration Working Group and Roundtable are really going to be at the vanguard of this incredibly important new industry, essentially. And we are working to help pull that together as an industry, as a new form of business, or new set of businesses, and also then attract and engage with the investment community to help make that happen. And so to move into the investment side of things, so we've got Andrew Smith with Greenbackers to talk about how the investment community is engaging on the ocean issues and some of the important and exciting opportunities that are coming. And from there, we'll move into a discussion about innovation as well. But Andrew.
Yeah, thanks very much, Paul. It's a real pleasure to be with you. And indeed, Paul, it is a pleasure to be in the same time zone as you. Usually when we are speaking, of course, you're speaking from Hawaii, your home, and it's lovely to have you here in Glasgow at the COP, which is my hometown and where I'm speaking from now. I think that the COP has been amazing. Of course, it's not over yet, and I've been privileged to attend some excellent events. What I'd like to talk about in my opening remarks are the real opportunities that I think there are for a group of stakeholders when it comes to the oceans and the ocean economy, the blue economy. Greenbackers is a clean technology business. We look to help new clean technologies get to the attention of potential end users, of first adopters. We look to recruit them as internal champions inside their businesses, and look to get them ultimately invested and into the marketplace. Everything that we look at has to be capable of moving the dial on climate change. And a lot of the things we look at are touch upon some of the issues we've already discussed and some that we will discuss later. We ran our own COP event yesterday, which was, in our view, the largest and probably the best technology showcase at COP26. We were privileged to have Bertrand Piccard of the Solar Impulse Foundation speak there, and I was reminded of two things that I think are relevant. First of all, he was present in a way when the Paris Accord was signed by the UN. He was present in the sense that he was in his airplane, his solar airplane, flying around the world, from which he spoke to Ban Ki-moon and extolled the virtues of renewable energy, at the same time as saying that, as well as the UN beginning to protect the environment at that time by signing the Paris Accord, they were launching the clean technology revolution. That is what we believe. We believe clean technologies can help to contribute to the fight against climate change, and very much so in the oceans. And before we get into a panel discussion, for our guests from ICC, and thanks to them for this opportunity, I'd like to give some real practical examples. So touching back to Christoph's initial remarks about floating wind, for example, the way those turbines are anchored to the seabed has to change. And you know, there are some great ecological solutions emerging using things like subsea micropiles, which will provide a much better, cleaner, faster, cheaper solution to make sure these things can go where they need to go and will actually stay there. There's some fantastic terraforming technology, you know, making land, useful land out of deserts, making the margins between the oceans and the land useful and stabilizing it using things called halophytes. You know, these businesses are at COP. They are taking their solutions to COP. There's fantastic solutions for electrifying our ocean basins. And what I want to say to the ICC members, and I know they have some very large and some medium-sized and some small businesses there, is that from an investment perspective, there are opportunities across the board, opportunities for all different sizes of business, whether they be supply chain, whether they be end users, whether they be early stage technology companies. There are opportunities for all different kinds of money, whether it be early stage investors, whether it be impact investors, or whether it be corporate money, whether it be debt type money. There are opportunities across the board, and some great guidance, of course, is emerging from places like the United Nations, who are issuing helpful information on how institutions, perhaps unfamiliar with investing in the blue economy, can begin to get their hands around that. And of course, the work that you, Paul, are doing and have been doing for many, many years in bringing the communities together and you know, making sure this debate is happening is of tremendous value to those communities. So, listen, what I'd like to do is leave it there for initial remarks and then get into getting into a discussion on these aspects later. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Andrew. And I think this connection from ocean economic activity to sustainability and climate challenges that both the large corporate players in the major sectors have across the board really leads to the need for the solutions that the investors are looking for and the corporate actors are looking for. And this is one of the great examples of innovation has been in the work that the Econcrete is doing. And we have Sella from Econcrete to bring that entrepreneurship and innovation experience to the table here as we look across the board at what's possible in dealing with ocean sustainable development and climate change challenges. So Ido, please.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for having me in this great discussion. I think that maybe starting with saying that one of the fine lines that went through the COP26 this week was the importance of innovation, and in a way, the different players and from state countries and others are not looking for solutions for reduce their progressing towards capacity, increasing their capacity, etc., or trying to keep business as usual while depending on technology to provide them the tools to comply with the different targets that they put in terms of ecological sensitivity or CO2 emissions. And maybe I'm here representing one of those tools. And maybe before I start, then it's very important to say that until lately, the technologies that were developed in this specific or to provide solution for those specific aspects came more of an impact way of innovation and teams and companies that was really looking to do a change in the way that the future world will look and operate. And what happened, the change that is happening in the last few years, it's suddenly there is a market and there is an investment and there is a pull from the market for those technologies. So suddenly it's not just those people with the agenda of changing the world, and all of us. I'm a marine biologist, so I'm putting myself in the group of tree huggers. But suddenly we see people that are more technology oriented because there is a pull from the market for solution, and I think it's a great way to go forward. At Econcrete, what we're doing is basically tackling climate change from different ways. With 50% of world population resides along coastline, with prediction of sea level rise, increased storminess. What we see across our coastline is a process that we call coastal hardening. Is a lot of infrastructure that needs to service this huge mass of people that reside near the oceans, and those infrastructure now need to comply with different factors, different waves, different storms, different periods. So breakwaters become bigger and stronger and higher. Piers are higher, piles. The way that we pump water from the ocean or our outlets into the ocean are changing. And when you look and you analyze this, and as a marine biologist, I'm focusing on, for many years, I was focusing on the biology developed on coastal infrastructure. 70% of coastal infrastructure worldwide are concrete based. And concrete has basically a negative impact on the biology and the marine environment because of different reasons. And what Econcrete was targeting when we developed the technology is providing the industry a tool for basically a more responsible way for coastal construction, coastal marine construction. How can we comply with the structural needs and the operational needs of working waterfront, but at the same time promote different factors which are important in terms of biodiversity, species richness, carbon sequestrations, and harnessing our waterfronts, our huge, massive waterfronts, in order to provide us some ecosystem services. And it was an agenda 10 years ago, and suddenly now there is a market. And we had this process of developing the technology, and now we see we see the pull from the market. If it's at a state level, at a governmental level, at state levels, and also at the corporate level, and going from the nearshore construction up to the offshore construction. And I think this is just showing a change in the industry of adopting new technologies and putting them in action as fast as they can in order to evaluate them. And if they're validated, then actually putting them in the process and getting them in line and pushing those solutions forward. And I think I'm representing just a tiny part of this, is like dealing with in my specific topics of coastal construction, but you can see the same as in energy. You can see the same in efficiency of fuels, the way that we different technology for carbon sequestration across the board, and different levels in the marine environment, and I think I think this is a great time to be an innovator in this specific one.
Thanks, Ido. I think we would all agree that it is a great time to be an innovator, especially in the blue economy, with the amount of attention and focus and growth that's going on in so many different sectors. The opportunities out there, and the work that Andrew and others are doing to help pull together the innovators, and what we are working to do through the World Ocean Council, through the Blue Economy, Global Blue Economy Innovation Network, is to help ensure that the innovators, and particularly the accelerators and incubators that are working with the innovation and solutions community, are focused on the issues then and the market. So the corporate sector that has challenges, and there are specific issues that form the basis for those challenges, let's make sure the innovation then focuses, as you've done at Econcrete, on specific solutions to specific problems, so that we can really attract the investment and get the R&D undertaken, and really get those solutions to market as quickly as possible, by connecting the market, i.e. the large corporate players in the ocean, with the innovators and solution providers, and with the investment side of things. Well, thanks everyone for really covering a whole range of the kinds of things that make the ocean business ecosystem so complex and so exciting, and also so challenging as we all work to address climate change and sustainable development. I think if we can spend a bit of time then just opening up the discussion here and really thinking about our audience as being the broader International Chamber of Commerce community of the particularly the non-ocean oriented business investment and innovation community, and what sort of aspects of the work to advance responsible business development in the ocean that's tackling climate issues, that's addressing biodiversity, that relate to the particular circumstances of ocean business development. What are the sorts of things we want to, as an ocean business community, really communicate to and help our colleagues in the broader business community understand, and how can we best engage with them on these cross-cutting issues that are important to them as well. So happy to have thoughts from any and everyone on the panel here.
Yeah, Paul, I'm happy to kick off on that. For me, I think some of the most surprising things I've learned over the last 10 days or so, the first part of COP, have been understanding some of the drivers that are really making behavioral change more likely. I was privileged to be attending a shipping conference partway through COP, and there was some very, you would say, conservative banking people represented there who fund fleets and that kind of thing. Now, shipping, of course, 90% of the world's trade goes on the ocean. Shipping, if it were a country, would be the 6th most polluting country in the world. Shipping touches on many, many things, including port infrastructure. But what was really interesting for me was these conservative bankers were saying, in 2 years, in 3 years, people in supermarkets will have an app on their phone, and they will be tracking the emissions of the products that they're looking at. And they will be making purchasing choices on the basis of those emissions. And if something is more expensive because it was transported in an emission-free way, will they pay more for it? Indications suggest that perhaps they will. And my purpose for sharing that story is to say change, even in conservative sectors, is coming down the track at speed. And it will touch upon every aspect of our lives. And I think beginning to understand the speed with which this is happening, the huge movements in the tectonic plates of world business, of the world's economy, understanding that, being aware of that, can begin to make the case for all businesses to get their arms around this and to think about how that might impact on what they do each day. And I think that could make it easier to realize that what's happening in the oceans touches us all, because it absolutely does, as well as being a huge driver of weather, of carbon sequestration, of all of those things. From a hard economic point of view too, what happens on the ocean touches us all, quite dramatically. And I think if our audience in ICC, we're privileged to speak with them, I think if our audience can begin to understand that to the extent they don't already, that might be quite helpful.
And this is great, Andrew. I was at a very broadly encompassing event on the second or third night of the COP here, and was asked to say a few words. And everyone was asked to speak at this large, diverse group of people, mostly a business community, but not entirely. But anyway, to be provocative. And my point was very similar. I ask everyone to think of how they are connected with the ocean in terms of their work and their business, especially the business folks in terms of supply chain, waste streams, et cetera. So this is really part of part of our mission here, I think, as part of the ocean business community, is to help make that connection for everyone. Other thoughts? Yeah, please go ahead,
Yeah,
Jill.
I was going to say, no, I agree completely. And I think it was a really good way of introducing it, because I think at the start, there might be a number of organisations who are thinking, well, I'm not in the space, what's it got to do with me? How am I going to get involved, and how is it relevant? But what we found very interesting is sort of like a solution in this space. It's been going for the last 10 years, as I mentioned, is that at first we thought that the people who would be coming into the space, or who we'd partner with, would be people who were already in the space, who had deep knowledge of the oceans. But it's been really interesting to see that actually the innovators and the first companies to sort of really capture and get interested were people like Shopify, people like Stripe, Microsoft, and they've come into it looking at how they can get involved by pre-purchasing carbon credits at an inflated price, which has been fantastic for people who've got solutions in this sector, because what it's enabling them to do is to accelerate the solutions, to be able to go and test things and get started. So it's very interesting how they've taken that approach. So for organisations who don't immediately think that they have a place in the ocean, I think that's one of the ways to be able to think about, well, around this carbon credit play, is there an angle there? And that's going to be, I think, quite fascinating. And then there's also looking at the sort of coastal ecosystems. Some companies are starting then to look at coastal ecosystems, because it's sometimes easier to start there in terms of looking at managing the risk and understanding what's involved. Whereas with the deep ocean, the opportunities is large, but there's a lot of work to be done to get there. But it's probably worth the effort in terms of getting involved, because as I mentioned earlier, because of the scalability and the permanence. But it's there is a lot more research that's required, and actually the bringing together of people in various capacities to try and get this industry moving quickly.
That's right. And the ocean carbon sequestration will, just by virtue of its potential, will come to dominate the carbon offset market in the medium to longer term. So this is going to be everyone's business interest if they're thinking about carbon offset. Other thoughts from around the table?
Yeah. So Paul, I think that the point is, nobody can escape climate change. Nobody can escape the fact that we have a huge amount to do between now and 2050, especially in the next 10 years. And we cannot solve climate change without working with the oceans, to come back to my opening piece. And therefore, climate change touches everybody, and therefore the oceans have to touch everybody, either directly or indirectly. I suppose I take a slightly different position to Andrew, which you may not be surprised about, but in that I'm not convinced in the green consumer. I've worked in areas in the house where I think there is a great segment, about 10 to 15% of a market, where people use their wallet, whether it's animal welfare, whether it's organic food, or whether it's carbon, and they're a very important segment. But in the end, we need policy support, because otherwise others will free ride on the back of those who use their wallet. And part of the challenge of business in our space is to have a dialogue with government, with policymakers, with NGOs, so that the framework can be put in place so the oceans can do their part. If we look at renewable energy, we cannot sell power from floating wind without support from a government-backed revenue system. We certainly can't sell from wave energy at the moment. But the time will come when we don't need that support, as has happened in other renewable technologies. We also can't work in a carbon market, really, without some form of government support, even if it's just standards and getting standards right and making sure that this is properly policed and we don't get cowboys out there doing the wrong stuff. And then the food markets, food, of course, is always regulated, is always managed. So I think as business people, we need to do our bit over the next 30 years, but we also need to encourage others in the public sector, in the private sector, in the third sectors, to come together, and that's what we've got to do. And COP, of course, Paul, where you've been this week, is a critical part of that. And we all hope for a successful outcome of COP. We've all got our own pet requests, I think, coming through that we would like to see COP deliver. But there's a lot hanging on that.
Yeah. And this. Sorry, go ahead.
If I could come back a little bit on that, and I acknowledge completely what Christoph has said. We absolutely need a consistent policy support across the world for what we're trying to do. No question about that. But in terms of the power of the consumer and that dynamic, I believe, indeed, through some of the excellent speakers we've had at World Ocean Council events, Paul, we've had people from very, very large, very conservative funds making it very clear that they are walking into businesses and saying, what's your carbon reduction plan? And if they don't have one, they just walk out. We've also had the very self-same businesses, and this to be addressed to Christoph's point about the power of the consumer, saying, we are looking to the next generation of the uber wealthy people that we look after, those with trust funds and all those. They are reacting very differently and will behave very differently. And we do some business as Greenbackers out of Houston. Old oil and gas money, absolutely, but the next generation of that money is going to behave very, very differently. So I would counter that the power of the consumer, particularly the social media savvy consumer, is going to exponentially grow, and the pressure they can bring to bear on businesses very effectively is going to exponentially grow. And I think the other thing I would say is that in terms of things like wave energy, and something I know very, very well, I agree, Christoph, if we're going to try and have wave energy, tidal energy, these alternative energies compete on the basis of the price of the electrons, then it will always be 10 years away for the next 10 years, because wind and floating wind can do that. But there are solutions, particularly in the 10 watts to 10 megawatt space, where wave energy can supply a solution to a problem, which no other energy source can currently do. And there are technical solutions available right now with end users supporting use case demonstrations, indeed off the coast of Hawaii, where Paul lives, which will lead to sales of wave energy devices in coming years. These things are absolutely coming down the track. There's no question in my mind about that.
Yeah, one of the real challenges with the ocean economy has been how much of it is out of sight and out of mind from the consumers. But as you say, I agree with both of you that there has been a real challenge linking the consumers, and really retail seafood has been the main place where that's connected, but that's changing, and there are so many now people who are aware of and concerned about the future of the ocean, and starting to think more laterally about how they, to our earlier point, how they are connected with the ocean, and so to even make those set of connections more clear amongst the various parts of the corporate world is in itself a challenge. I don't know if Ido or Peter, if you have some thoughts on this in terms of how this relates to the world you operate in.
Sure. To pick up on the point of the drivers for decarbonization, I think it's a very interesting topic, because we've been tracking our carbon footprint since 2008, but we only embarked on this journey of creating our decarbonization strategy back in 2019. And I remember putting together a slide for an executive audience where we're talking about drivers. And back then, 2 years ago, up on top, we put, reputation, awareness, this is the right thing to do. But since then, over the past 2 years, it's been an exponential rise, an absolute explosion of, the number of requests I'm seeing from customers and from financing institutions to report on our decarbonization strategy, everything to do with ESG, what are our plans around the assets. which is definitely very positive. You know, everybody's starting to look at their Scope 3 emissions, and that touches us as a logistics business. And there's also never really been a time in this climate change space. I think we're, shipping ports are not the only industry that would say that, for collaboration. For example, right now we're looking at things like how are we going to power the ships without diesel, which is a much, it's a longer term debate. I mean, today, like, large scale solutions don't exist, and I was interested to learn that green hydrogen, right? Everybody's talking about methanol, ammonia, and these types of propulsion systems. Today, green hydrogen is less than 2% of the global supply, right? And the only way to push that forward is by setting, concrete action plans by, industrial groups to avoid the chicken and egg problem. And I can totally see that being also the case on creating the markets for, all sorts of climate change or, environmental solutions in the oceans. But I was also very happy to hear from many of the speakers today that markets are coming up. And I think it's the same thing. It's just like, this explosion over the past literally couple of years in this run up to COP26, which is fantastic to see.
Maybe,
please,
maybe adding to what you said, Peter, I think if you look into impact statements and if you look at what other companies are looking in the market and who they want to get service from, I think we will see a change, or not a change, but adding other levels which are equivalent to what we see in CO2 emissions and decarbonization. But like this is the big topic, and everything is related to that. And this moves a lot of different issues from new technologies and renewable energies and etc. But suddenly you're starting to see biodiversity. That is the species richness. Factors that are important, ecosystem services, that will start and different models, economical models that can make sure that we can promote those targets in a similar way that we saw through how the world dealt with the CO2 emissions. Building the structure to address those topics, and we're starting to see those trickle in. I'm starting to see it because we're evaluating by different clients, and it's suddenly they're not just looking to the CO2 issue.
And this is, what we're really seeing now is this linkage, this ocean, climate, biodiversity nexus. And if we're going to have an ocean that is optimized for its ability to help regulate, modulate the climate, and even to enhance its ability to sequester carbon, we need a healthy ocean. And then, so, as you say, the biodiversity, the ecosystem functioning is essential to that. And so these things, and this is what, really core to why the ocean operating environment is different and special and complicated. It's a global three-dimensional commons, and we've got to have that ecosystem function as a core to anything else that we want to depend on the ocean for, be it carbon sequestration, oxygen production, etc. And I think a big part of the challenge is how we harness and rapidly enough the potential for the business community to put that picture together, and bringing in the other stakeholders, as was mentioned, the importance of the policy framework, the legal requirements that work with the business community, and those that want to engage responsibly in figuring this out is really what we all need to be working on. And I think here the International Chamber of Commerce, being the peak body for the business community at a global scale, is our key ally in this. And I think overall we want to help the ICC help us in the ocean business community to move these things forward. The time always goes so quickly when we have these sort of discussions. We probably should go and catch any kind of closing comments people want to have that you would like to share in this context of an International Chamber of Commerce session on the ocean and climate change as we wrap up. So over to any closing thoughts from all of you.
Oh yeah, look, I'm happy to go first on that. First of all, pleasure to be talking to ICC members. Listen, large or small, your business is touched by what happens on the ocean. Differential pricing is being attached to debt products, depending on emissions, on carbon reductions. That will touch your business in one way or another. There are also specialist funds looking for new ideas and technologies to help things like deep ocean aquaculture. How can that be made to work? Different species of fish, different ways of feeding them. Your feed is being manufactured from captured carbon, for example. There are some amazing technologies out there. So whether you've got a technology, whether you've got a business that depends, as many businesses do, on goods, services transported across the ocean, whatever your need is, begin to understand your relationship with the ocean, because for sure, almost certainly you have one. Understand that relationship and begin to think about how the tectonic movements impacting on all aspects of that might impact on your business, and prepare.
Thanks, Andrew. Well spoken. Other comments as we wrap up here?
Yeah, I'm happy to go next. I mean, I strongly believe that the problem that imperils the planet today might be the greatest economic opportunity of the 21st century, but we need to move beyond great ideas into execution. Execution is absolutely everything here, but another key element is awareness. I think climate change and climate science has been a topic that too long has been discussed in very narrow circles. It must become, common curriculums. So, I'll just encourage everybody to learn more about it. Understand the impacts, understand, the kind of the mechanics of climate change, and with that in mind, really come together and look at plans, because it's a very interdisciplinary topic. It's not going to take one company or one focus, like scientific area. It really takes all of us from across the different industries and sectors.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And actually, that makes me think a point I want to just interject in here is if we've got young professionals that are seeing this, certainly to encourage them to look at the ocean industries. There's so much important, exciting work to be done across the sectors we're covering here, and many others. So really, there's a need for really bright young folks that care about these issues and want to help with them as companies develop. Other closing thoughts as we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose from my point of view, is if you aren't thinking about climate change, I would want to know why. And maybe you can't see a direct link to the oceans. I'm sure there's an indirect, but if it's not with the oceans, then you might be working in the cities, you might be working, as I go back to the forests, you might be working in other areas. Climate change touches everything, and I would encourage everybody to see it as a business requirement and a business opportunity, and also a personal requirement and personal opportunity. I've been working in this space for 15 years now, and I think, as Piotr just said, the time, it is very different. Things are happening now, happening fast, and it's not somewhere in your business plan. I think it's going to be there very soon. Yeah,
absolutely. And this came out loud and clear at COP, and that, with our theme here of make climate action everyone's business. That's certainly reiterating that point, Christoph. Ido or Jill?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I think we need to act very quickly, and businesses need to get engaged very quickly, because we're very shortly going to have a big problem in terms of the demand side is going to be so much greater than the supply side. Because on the supply side, while we've got great ideas and great solutions, these solutions need to be tested at scale. They need to be demonstrated. We need to do ecological risk assessments. We need to have policies in place. There needs to be monitoring. There needs to be verification. There needs to be, there's a whole industry to build. And there's a lot of collaboration as you put together. And we need governments to get involved early. Governments need to, where they've got national waters, they need to open up waters and let people in a controlled manner start to be able to do some year-long experiments. It's not a short experiment for a few days. We need to really understand which of the solutions are going to work and which solutions aren't going to work, and try to manage very carefully some of the unknowns and make sure that we're not causing damage. And some of the solutions won't work, but it's just going to take a lot of time and a lot of more research and demonstrations. So we need to get started very quickly because the demand is building, but the solutions need to be in the water and being tested.
Yeah, and I think we can say to those companies that are making net zero commitments and really looking to offsets as part of their strategy for that, to look to the ocean and how we can help them and they can help us really achieve those needs, and really consider what support's needed, as you say, from within the business community and at the certainly the government policy making level to move this forward. Any thoughts from you, Ido, as we close up?
Yes, just, so maybe I think maybe summarizing, I completely agree with the need of doing a faster process from pilot to implementation, and find different platforms that will allow for new technologies to be in a scale that provide more information about the capacity of solving issues. And I think it's not surprising that a lot of those solutions are coming from different entities that are dealing with the oceans. The oceans are the vectors, the most significant vectors for climate change in terms of impact. And on the other hand, they are the best buffer for them if it utilizes the same way in a proper way. So it's not surprising that a lot of those technologies that are basically can apply worldwide on solutions for climate change are oriented from different entities, states, practitioners that are dealing with the oceans, and I think it's a positive note as we go forward.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I've been hearing as we engage more and more with the innovation community is this urgency of let's accelerate how we get ideas through the valley of death and in front of the investors and in front of the marketplace, so that we can really get things tested, and if they need to be improved, but mainly implemented. As I think Peter was saying, execution is what it's all about, and so we really want to make sure we're getting the ideas and the innovations we need in place as soon as we can. Well, with that, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Peter, Christoph, Jill, Andrew, and Ido. Great discussion. I would encourage those of you watching this or listening in, feel free to get in touch with us at the Ocean Council, www.oceancouncil.org, and we can connect you with any of the panelists here. I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to colleagues in the business community. And we will continue to work with the ICC and others in the business community to not only make climate action everyone's business, but make ocean and climate action everyone's business as we work to address these challenges in front of us. So thanks, everyone here. We'll stop the recording of the session now and look forward to continuing this work into the future. And not only waiting for the COPs, but the work that needs to be done throughout the year in the intersessional period as well, because the issues and challenges aren't going away. So thanks, everyone.